Hey there, welcome back and congratulations on the completion of the first episode out of 7. And with that, we now have established the pace, which will continue throughout the rest of the tutorial. So that means if you were okay with the first episode, then you will certainly be okay to carry on and complete our holographic site. And by the way, the same can then be said for the main course of the AR-15. So that is the speed and the pace that I set. And I understand that sometimes it might feel like we're all over the place. Like now we're doing this, in the next moment we're doing another thing. But that is just within the nature of 3D modeling. And especially on a piece like that, where at a certain point, it's not symmetrical anymore. So that means that there will be a lot of rotations, making sure that our reference images are matching from each one of the sides. And as you know, we set it up for all of them. And because of that, it can sometimes feel like, give me a break. I'm still digesting what we were just doing, and I'm already on the next thing. But if I wouldn't do it like that, I would never have been able to complete any of my tutorials in the past, and especially something like that now, which is really, how should I say, the pinnacle of weapon art. An AR-15, together with the attachments for it, that's as hard surface as it gets. And that is something that I've always wanted to do, but I was also always very worried about the amount of effort it would take me to complete that, because I know the amount of work that gets into that. And for those of you that remember my AK-47 course, which by the way is 10 years old now, and which is free to watch on YouTube, just as a side note. This one also took me a long time to complete, but it was nothing compared to the AR-15. And the reason for that is the AK is just built in a more simple way. There's a reason why there's this story that the soldiers in Vietnam were ditching their M16s to get their hands on an AK instead, because it would just work more reliable in the jungle conditions and things like that, where the AR has all these pieces and elements. And because of that, it also took me an enormous amount of time. And of course, also then I didn't just want to do one texture. I wanted to make 10 textures. So that I'm striving off here a little bit from the holographic side. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of background knowledge, how this all came to be. And the holographic side is one of the many parts that I've been working on and that you would be working on if you also followed along with the main course. And I can promise that the end result is really worth it. And the same can be said then for this holographic side, which I also hope you're going to like. And therefore, once again, congrats for still being here. It shows your dedication. And in the same spirit, we will then just carry on now with the next episode. We will do more low poly modeling and essentially bring the low poly model almost to completion. Before the end of this episode, we will then do a naming convention. So that in the episode after this one, we can then start to work on our high poly model. And that is then also already the base that we are building now with the low poly. The modifiers that we will then add to it will easily turn it into a high poly. So this is pretty much all I wanted to say. And with that, I'd say let's continue and I'll see you soon. Hey there, friends. Welcome back. This is where we left things off, and that's where we will continue. And the first action will be to make a ring selection here on that one. Subdivide that, select the ring, put the auto merge off, and let's select edge slide. So now with edge slide, we are going to push it all the way there to the left. Press W to get out of edge slide and drag it back to the right. With that, we have now established a bit of a bevel there, which is what we need. Let's do the same thing then here. Let's put edge slide back on, press W, put it back out here. Let's compare with our reference. And you'll see we got that detail looking right. Let's then also work on these other details that we have there. So these adjustment elements here, they are curved. And we are now going to make use of our 24-sided cylinders, which earlier we didn't delete, but we still have them in the scene. If not, you can just spawn them again. Let's position them here. And you can see that now I'm going over here to edge mode, make these connections, make a subdivision into the center. And based on that, we can then delete these faces and fill the empty geometry back up and connect it like this here. So now we are going to bevel the front faces in order to get that curvature that we just looked at there. And actually, we're just beveling these edges. And you see it's connecting there at the edges here. We just have to make sure that it's really merged then. With 0.1 merge distance, we make sure of that. And that means we have the first element that we can now push back there. And let's scale that on the x-axis. Let's position that. You can see it there on the reference image as well. And that would then be the first detail. We can delete the other one. And later we're going to copy that into place after we unwrapped. For now, we're just leaving one of them there. Let's then continue by creating a new cylinder. 20 sides, plane axis put to Y. And that way we can draw this out here. You can see my dimensions here. I'm going to put the depth to 4 millimeter on that. Let's position that back here. Let's go over to edit mode and let's put a subdivision. And let's then take that face and do an inset here based on our reference. I'm putting it to 1 millimeter. Let's put vertex snap on, extrude and snap it here against these edges. Let's select these faces and in X-ray we deselect the right side as well as these free faces at the bottom. Let's extrude out, snap it back, push out and align on the X-axis. We can then delete the faces there as well as the ones here at the back. Let's make a selection for these faces and we want to delete them. Let's then take these edges here and based on that we extrude, snap back, align on the Y-axis. Let's then dissolve some of the edges that we don't need. And the same goes for these ones. We connect it back later in a clean way. Now we can drag that vertex point up. Let's pull that back a bit and let's then extrude that out again here. Let's drag this out and I'm switching to global transformation. Put X to 0 and put the quick origin right there onto that edge. Now we can go over and add a mirror modifier that we mirror on the y-axis. And based on that, let's just hide that outer case so we see more what's happening. Let's then take these edges, and I'm putting the vertex snap off for a moment. Let's extrude that out here like that. Let's make sure it's nicely aligned there. And followed by that, we put a subdivision in there and take that vertex and position it like this here. Let's then take that face, and we want to make a snapback copy that we separate out. Now let's delete the mirror modifier on that one and put the quick origin there into the center so that we can easily drag it out. Let's extrude that. And now let's take that one here into isolation for a moment. We want to put auto merge back on now, as well as vertex snap, so that we can now extrude and snap it against that edge there. Let's come back to that piece. And now we're going to rotate it 10 degrees. Let's come back here and let's make a difference Boolean then with that. Let's position that and let's make sure we got a bit of space there on the right side. Let's confirm the Boolean, delete the helper. And let's continue by making another subdivision here. I'm putting the divisions up to 4. Dissolve the lower 3 edges and delete then these faces that we have here. And vertex snap the other one here against this. We have to do that 2 times here so that it really snaps. Let's extrude and now snap it against that one. Let's come over here to that vertex, and I want to push that a bit further out before we then take the edge and make a bevel on it. So that's going to be a bevel with 6 segments. Let's add a subdivision here on that one then. Let's drag that down like this. Let's also take the edge then and let's make a subdivision with, let's see how many segments, 4. Now we can manually just drag that a bit further down on the right side. And now we want to spawn another one of these bolts here. So this time we're going to use the Phillips bolt together with the pan head. Let's put that to 3 millimeter here, and down here we put it to 20 sides. Let's rotate. And based on that, we still have vertex snap on. Let us position it here, but I have to enable center in the vertex snap settings so that it snaps right there where we just had it. Let's put vertex snap off and let's position it here like that. Let's take it into isolation, and once again we're going to delete everything here at the back. Let's grow the selection, delete that, fill that here at the back. And now we're taking ring selections like this here. Every second one of them. Let's collapse these. And let's do that once again here like that. Let's go to the front. And we want to separate out this selection here. Now we can select the outer vertex points, grow the selection 4 times, and simply delete it like that. Let's then join that back together, these two here. And now we're going to manually fill that here. Based on that, let's merge by distance, and I'm gonna have it at 0.1. Now we have a bit of a distortion. Let's put vertex snap back on, and let's snap it here like that so that this is nicely aligned against each other. And just like that, we have a really nice element here that is also low poly enough now. Before it was simply too high poly. The bolt factory was certainly helping us with that. Now we can take that. Let's put the quick origin into the center so that we can easier work with it, and let's snap it there against that edge. But in fact, let's drag it out here to the front, and I'm going to scale it on the y-axis to make it a bit more bulky there. Later we're going to copy it into the other places, but for now, let's continue then here to work that detail also into that side. And before we do that, I'm going to dissolve these edges that we had there in the center. Remember, we collapsed the mirror. Let's make a copy of that element, and let's then scale that copy up just a bit. You see my scale settings there in the lower left. Now we come to the back, and we want to fill it like that here. Let's collapse the mirror, dissolve that edge in the center, and we want to connect it like that here on these two vertex points. Let's then invert the selection, and that is then a matter of extruding it here perfectly to the right side. Let's put it to 2 millimeters for the extrusion here. And now we can take it into isolation. Let's position it like that here, and based on that, it's time to Boolean again. And there we go. Let's apply that. And now we have that detail also there in the outer case. And I want to take that here to normal orientation and drag that further in there. And since we have mirror on, it's also doing that on the other side. Let's make a copy of that piece. Let's drag that up here where we need it, because this one is different. So first, let's delete these points here. Now we select all of that and say S, Y, and 0 to align it, and we also want to give it a scale on the y-axis. You see, that's what it looks like here at the upper one. And based on that, we can dissolve these edges. Let's then take that loop and let's give it a bevel here with 2 segments. And now we can rotate it 10 degrees, same as before, and we want to position it where that needs to be here. And we can scale that up a bit. And here we have it. So that piece is looking good. Let's go to that one, and we want to put the quick origin on it, make a copy, drag that out, rotate it, and we are then positioning it at x0. Let's select the faces at the back, invert the selection, delete, extrude it out like that. And based on that, we now have 24 sides for this element here. And you see how this is almost touching there, the upper edge. So that's going to be our orientation for it. We want to rotate that 10 degrees. We're still in normal orientation, so let's drag it up. And now we can scale it. Just a simple scale, and let's push that out a bit further here. And now we can make a union Boolean with that. Let's apply that. And let's make some connections like that here for our vertex points. Dissolve these ones here. Let's select the outer edges and we want to bevel that. We can put it like that, but now we enable clamp overlap so that it's automatically getting to the upper vertex point. Let's merge it by distance. And let's then bevel that one here as well with 3 segments. So also we require a bevel here on some of these elements. What we're going to do is make an inset on these faces, and with control we push it out a slight amount like that here. So that is shaping up well, and the next detail will then be this here. Let's just draw a cube into the scene for starters. You can see my dimensions here, but we're going to make sure it's looking good from the depth as well in a moment. We focus on the front now. Let's start by positioning it like that. And let's delete the right side as well as putting a mirror on it. Let's put that to y-axis. And let's subdivide again. And now, since we still have normal orientation on the gizmo, we put it then to global and continue with our knife tool to cut it like this here. Let's do that perfectly on the y-axis for that one. Now we collapse the mirror and extrude that arrow out here. And I have it at 0.6 millimeter for the Z distance. Let's then take these edges here that we can now dissolve as well as these ones. And based on that now, we put the bevel weight up to 1 here for everything. Let's then continue to put the bevel modifier on that, and we want to put that to weight. Let's put the offset to 0.5 and the segments up to 3. Now we're selecting these 2 front faces, and on that we can now switch to edge mode and put that to 0.4 for the bevel strength. Let's just toggle it off for a second here. And based on these edges, we can now put that to 0 for the bevel weight. So that's starting to shape up. Let's take these faces and let's simply scale them down a bit. Let's position it here like this. Now we can collapse the bevel modifier, and we just have to do some manual cleanup here. Let's merge that together. And let's clean that up. Let's then see what we have down here. And I'm going to merge these edges, otherwise it's a bit too high poly there. Let's remove the bevel weight information. Now we come down here to the bottom and we vertex snap it like this here so that this is looking nice and not distorted. Let's do that also here on that one, and with that we have our arrow button here in place. Let's select these faces, right click, and let's triangulate them. And we can delete the faces here at the back. Let's then rotate that 10 degrees once again. Let's position it here like this. And now we need to have that cavity in the back there as well, where that is going in. I'm going to make a copy of the arrow button, fill the back of it, invert, delete. Let's take that and let's extrude it to the back here. And now we can take these two into isolation. Let me put local orientation on that. And with that, let's scale it up just a bit here. Let's then Boolean that. And there we have it. Let's confirm. And now we can connect it here in the center. Let's delete the left side. And it's time for rotation and scale here. Control and A. And now based on that, let's put the mirror back on it. And later we're going to simply copy and rotate that after we were unwrapping. For now, we're going to continue here. Let's put a bevel on that one. Let's also bevel that here. And I'm going to put it to 2 segments. Let's make some connections, and with Super Smart Create, you can do that very conveniently. Otherwise, you have to do it manually there all the time. Let's dissolve and let's take that, and now we're gonna make an inset like that. And I know it looks crazy. We take these edges here, dissolve it, so that we're left here with this one. Let's put some vertex points there into the center of these edges. I'm using Super Smart Create for that. Let's switch over to normal orientation. And manually, we drag that out like that so that this is looking more rounded there. We do that on the x-axis here. And now we are taking these edges. Let's subdivide that. And I'm going to put the division to 10. Let's dissolve the lower ones so that we're only left with a bit more space there, which now we can extrude out like that here. So let's connect the vertex points with triangulate faces followed by triangulate to quad. And with that, we can now take these edges. Let's put orientation back to default. And now we can position it like that here. Let's then take these edges and also drag them down like this. And now we're going to take that, put it to edge mode, deselect the ones we don't want to bevel, and speaking of which, let's bevel it like that here. And I'm giving it 3 segments. Let's now take these vertex points and let's merge by distance. That removed 4 vertices on my end. And let's just make sure it's all welded together, which it is. Now I'm going to connect it like this, dissolve some of these edges that don't really do much for us to save the one or other polygon. And now we can also dissolve that here, as well as these ones here, and also these ones. This one I cannot dissolve. First I have to connect like that, because Blender always needs to have the one or other edge, otherwise it forces it there. So let's also optimize that here by making some connections. And based on that, we now have our panel here in a good state. Let's continue to connect it like this. Now we select all the remaining faces. Right click, triangulate, right click again, triangulate to quads. Let's come over here to the back. I'm gonna select the full edge loop and simply delete these vertex points there. Let's select that loop here once more, and I want to push that a bit further in there. And now it's time, my friends, to look at the reference and take a look at that piece. it looks almost the same as this, but on the left, it's sticking out a bit further. That means it's not perfectly symmetrical. And in general, we will then start working here on the lower side. So please pay attention the edges that I'm going to select now, which are these ones here. Let's copy them. Let's separate that out. Let's select that, and I'm going to call it line 1. I'm deleting the mirror modifier on that. Let's bring back our outer case, and here we are now doing the same thing for these edges. Let's select it after we separated it, and that is line 2. Let's now take it and join it together with Ctrl J. And based on that, I'm going to vertex snap this here against the smaller one. Let's vertex snap it here on the Z-axis, extrude, and vertex snap together like that here. Now, let's get out of isolation and let's make an extrusion. And this one down here, I'm vertex snapping on the Z-axis so that this is aligned. Let's do some more extrusions. And basically, we are just manually putting that together here now like that. So now we have that all as one piece. And with that, we can fill it. And that can now be extruded out here and snapped against this edge there so that this is aligned here. Let's extrude that out further. And over here, we're going to snap it as well then. Let's then take that element and we want to isolate that, take these faces here, and let's then make an extrusion like that. We're going to delete the faces there, as well as dissolving these ones on both sides since we had X-ray mode on. Now, let's vertex snap it like this, as well as this then. So now we can take these vertex points. Let's snap it against these edges. And now with these vertex points, let's position it like that. And let's then take these edges and extrude it further out here. And I'm putting it to X0. Let's then drag that further down. Because we see a bit of this extension. If you are looking at the reference, you will see that as well. Let's select the control panel again in object mode. Let's go back to edit then on that. We subdivide it here, S, X, and 0 to align it. And now we can use the knife tool to follow along here with this shape that we need. I'm aligning it on the X-axis there so that this is nicely straight. And then we can delete these faces here, as well as extruding it out S, Y, and 0 to align it on the Y-axis. And with vertex snap back on, we put it over there. Remember, we have auto merge on so that this gets welded. And now we got that nice shape there in place. And with that, we can then continue here on that piece that we were working on. Let's take these vertex points, and you see how we have a bit of a cavity there. I'm putting vertex snap off, and I will then just manually make sure that we see a bit of it there. So let's put it like this. And on that side, we want to do the same so that there is a bit of a space there, because nothing is ever going to be perfectly on top of each other. I'm going to make a subdivision here because I feel that was still too low poly looking. And that would be a good start here for that. Let's come over and let's put cavity on and shadows just for a moment. I want to point out to you these cavities that we were just working on. And now I'm seeing that this is not perfectly planar, thanks to the cavity mode that we just put on. What I'm going to do about that is select that face here, come over here and put it to linked flat faces. That will then almost give us the full selection, and with Shift we just manually add these ones here. Please make sure not to select anything else, because now we're going to right click, go to Loop Tools, and let's flatten that. So now we have it perfectly straight there, or flattened more like. And while we're at it, we can also take a look here at the other sides, and you will see that things are nice and smooth looking here. And that means we did a good job. Let's put the cavity and shadow off again because it can be distracting. And with that, we can now continue here. You see that we have a different silhouette there from the side. It's not perfectly flat. I'm using the knife tool on the x-axis. Cut it like that. Let's dissolve these edges here like this, and also the ones here at the upper part. And with that, we can now take that face, right click, and let's put quick lattice on that. And with the lower control point selected, we put it like this here. So let's collapse the lattice modifier. And now we put a mirror modifier on it. Let's take a look then at this piece, and it's time to separate out that selection here. And based on that selection, I'm going to extrude a bit down like that, as well as up here. And we can then push it out like this. The reason is we're going to use that as a Boolean operator. Let's make sure it's extending out like this. And now we can make a difference Boolean. Put that to exact. And let's take a look at this here. It looks good. So we apply, and now we can just clean that up a bit. We got some double vertex points here, which we don't want to have. And because of that, I'm going to take these two edges, dissolve them. And now we got that as a blank face that we can connect in a way that is nice and clean here. And I'm going to triangulate the faces on that one here. So that's a bit of an abstract piece, I understand. But that is just what it is. I still have the helper object from the lattice, which I now delete. And let's then take these faces that we separate out. And we can then reuse that as a Boolean. Let's align that on the y-axis, S, Y, and 0. Let's fill it like that here. And also here at the front and at the end. Let's then select everything, and with Alt and N, we get to the Flip Normal menu. Let's confirm that we want that flipped. Let's take it into isolation. And let's position it over here like this. And let's put the difference on that. Let's apply that. And now let's dissolve that center edge. And while we're at it, let's also dissolve some edges that we still had on that one here. This one here as well. And let's continue to make some connections like this here. So that is then getting connected. And now I'm gonna toggle the Picatinny folder off so that this is not so distracting, but you see that it's perfectly matching with it. I'm gonna actually dissolve that edge there as well as these two on that element here. Let's also dissolve these edges here. Careful not to dissolve something that we still need. And now I'm gonna show you my quick favorites where I was just adding the mirror modifier. So I have that mapped on the space bar. And every time I press space bar, I get access to all my favorite actions. So throughout most of the tutorial, I will not add that, and I will just go to the regular menu so that you better see what I'm doing. That just as a side note, let's collapse the mirror, let's bring the Picatinny rail back into the scene, and let's remember that this side here is extending out further. So I'm going to make an extrusion. And now we can just manually reshape that a bit here. We are being in X-ray mode, so that means we affect the other side as well. Now we can also dissolve these edges here. And these ones here as well. Single edge there at the bottom. So I want that to come up a bit more. And because of that, let's first of all take that down a bit. And let's also then do that here. And with that, we can subdivide there into the center. I'm putting the number of cuts up to 2. And with that, we got something to work with here. As I like to say when I add some edges. Because wherever we add a subdivision, it needs to have a meaning. So let's now continue on this detail, which is going right there through the center. We can see that very well here. And that requires then also that piece here. And for that, I'm going to make a copy of that low poly that we have here. Push that over to the other side. Let's just put it there for now. And let's take that here into isolation. I want to take these edges and subdivide them. Let's align that on the y-axis with S, Y, and 0. Let's drag that here into the center and let's give it a bevel. And with that, we can now delete these faces. Fill them back up, make these connections here like that. Let's come back then to this element and we're gonna make another copy of it so that we have one for a backup for later. This one, let's position it like this here. And let's scale that down so that there are no intersections there at the top. Let's take that into isolation. Let's take these faces and we want to just push them out around here. No snapping needed. Now with inset, let's put it to 1 millimeter thickness. And now we're going to extrude out. And I'm going to take it into isolation. Select these edges here. And with vertex snap, put to edge mode. Let's snap it there against this edge. Let's make a copy of that element. Let's take it into isolation and let's put the difference Boolean on it, which we can now apply. And with that, we have a bit of cleanup work left to do. But first, let's take this element and let's just scale it down so that we actually see the depth that we have there. So this is going to be that screw element, which now we want to give a bit of detail to here. I'm gonna make one of these here with Shift Control and the plus key. Collapse that, extrude that in, and let's give that a bevel here around the outer edges. So that is shaping up well, but there's still some more work left to do on it. And earlier I forgot to dissolve these edges there. These are not needed. And while we're at it, let's make sure that this is aligned here in the side orthographic view. Now I'm going to make a copy that I separate out here from that face. Let's put quick origin on that. Let's extrude that out like that. And you see where our quick origin is now. Based on that, we push it over here like that. Let's add a subdivision here. Let's then take it like that. And let's make sure that it wraps around our Picatinny with a little bit of space there. So now we can take these two objects here and I'm going to drag that over so that this is relatively there in the center from that screw here. Speaking of which, let's put it like that here. And let's make sure that this is extending over the screw. And here we're gonna make sure that edge is not interfering there with that cylinder. Let's come over to these edges. And you see how this is actually perfectly round there. So based on that, we're gonna give it a bevel as much as we can here, because you see we have the clamp on. So let's just do like that. And now let's put the clamp on. That's what I meant. So with the clamp on, it automatically stops where it needs to stop. And based on that, we can now take this element and take these faces down a bit with an extrusion. And that automatically also adds a bit of a bevel there at the front, which is what we want. So while being in X-ray mode, I'm going to connect these vertex points here with Super Smart Create. Let's take a look at the reference because we want to add some more detail here on that side. So let's add that detail, but first what I want to do is clean up a bit here by putting all these into the Holosight folder. Let's press Shift and let's click on the eye symbol. Let's then unhide the folder only with the cube. And now I'm going to make a selection for these faces here. Invert the selection. Press H to hide all the faces so that it's once again easier as we are working on that here. And I'm subdividing that with Super Smart Create here. And now I'm doing another subdivision on these edges. Let's then take these, and they are already aligned, so we don't have to align it further. Let's bevel that after we put it there in the center. Let's take these faces here and let's put the quick lattice on it. And now we can take the control points that we have here on that side, and let me go over to the scale tool. I was just undoing what I did there, and scale it only on the y-axis. Now we can collapse the lattice, delete the helper, delete out these faces, fill them, and based on that, we got some nice detail there now as well. Let's also connect it here. And now we can unhide again with Alt and H. And let's also then connect it over like that, as well as dissolving these edges that we don't need then. And there we go, a nice detail added. Let me just unhide everything with Shift again by clicking on the eye. I then noticed that this detail here needs some work. And what I'm going to do is just show you that we have a steep angle there on the low poly. I didn't do anything yet, I just wanted to show you. Let's dissolve these edges that are disturbing us, and let's give it a bevel here. And that's already taking care of that then. This will bake fine, but that sharp angle would cause issues. So let's also dissolve the center edge there. And based on that, let's take that here into isolation now. I'm going to make another copy that I separate out. Let's position it over here like that, and let's extrude down. And now let's make sure you snap it against the same edge where I just snapped it against, because based on that, we extrude and snap here to the other edge there. Let's take that and let's position that around that small detail, because then we're going to use it as a Boolean. Put to difference. And let's just hide that small element. I'm going to put it to exact, apply all cutters. And now because of the Boolean, we want to merge by distance, put to 0.01. We want to minimize the chance to weld more than we need. Now take a look at that. This is actually one big edge. So I'm going to take these faces that connect to it, delete it, and also delete the face there at the bottom, and manually then make some filling here. And that one here with Alt key, let's also fill that. And that way we have taken care of that issue which came from our Boolean, where it didn't know how to connect it there. So let's select that one here, same issue here. We delete the face. Let's also delete that one. Based on that, we can then fill it back together here, because our outer edges are still in place. So we can just refill it, and that way we got that nice and clean here. Let's then take these edges that we want to dissolve, and that can be brought a little bit further into this whole thing. And while we're here doing some connections, let's do that here too. These edges don't connect anywhere, that's why they have to go. Let's also take a look at this here. I'm going to connect it over like that, dissolve these other edges there. Same thing then on the other side. And things are shaping up well here for that piece. It's kind of unfortunate that the player will hardly ever see it and we put all that work in. But that is what it takes sometimes. Let's add the triangulate modifier, and I like to put that up to 5 and put it to beauty mode. And that we can just leave on like this. Later it will just collapse it once we export. So let's come back here to this piece, and I'm gonna add this small hole here. You just saw the settings I put for the cylinder. Let's drag that out here. Let me show you my dimensions just in case you want to see that. What matters is that it's going through there. And before I put the Boolean, I'm going to dissolve these edges that are in the way here. And I can also come back here to that piece. And since we are still in curve mode, let's just align that a bit better there now with this small hole. And I'm going to rotate that a bit here as well on the Z-axis, and let's put that there into the center of it. So that's looking nice. Let's apply the Boolean on that. And I'm going to isolate it, triangulate the faces. And over here, we got some cleanup work to do with these edges that we can dissolve. Let's connect it like that. And let's then right-click, triangulate, and triangulate to quads. So that's shaping up well here. And I just noticed I had a face there in the center that I'm going to delete now. Because of that, I have to merge again here. And let's see what else we have. I'm going to take these edges here. And I'm going to give that a very slight bevel. But I want that to be smooth. Therefore, 2 segments are okay. Let's then connect it against some of these other details that we have in place there. Same as on that side. And on the other side, we already have that perfectly here in place with the edge loops. So let's see what we got there. Sometimes you see my mouse cursor disappearing on the right side because I'm looking at the reference. So speaking of which, this should be more beveled. And instead of doing a regular bevel, I'm going to take it here like this. And based on that, I'm going to use inset for it. Let's put some exact numbers here, 0.4 for both thickness and depth. And now the only issue is that this got a little bit messed up here. So in order to clean that up, I'm going to start by deleting these faces. Next, we want to isolate some faces, but first let's make the selection for it. Let's take it like this here, and we also want to include these 2 here. And there's another one down there. Let's take that too. Now we invert the selection with Ctrl and I. Press H to hide it. And based on that, we can now go to our vertex snap. Make sure you have it put to center as well. And that can now be just on the x-axis, be aligned here based on these vertex points. So let's do that manually. because we have a bit of an angle on there. That's why we need to just do it like this to ensure the alignment is back in place how we want that. And 2 more vertex points left down here. Now for the upper one, where we have that a bit distorted, let's align that one also against it. Next step, let's just unhide with Alt and H. Let's press Alt to select the full loop here, and we're gonna fill that. Let's zoom in here at the bottom. So let me select this edge, and with Super Smart Create, I added a vertex point, which I am now going to vertex snap here so that this is aligned. And then manually, while holding Shift, I make sure it's nice and planar. Followed by connecting that, and this one can also be vertex snapped. And now we are taking these edges all the way up here. Let's dissolve that as well as this one. And now with Control and with Alt key, we make a ring selection for all of these beveled ones. Deselect these ones that were extending into it. And let's take a look at that here also on the other side. So with precisely that selection, I'm going to subdivide. And now we put the smoothness up to 1. And you see how that ultimately makes it a bit more beveled. So that way we were using our inset to get that nice bevel in there without compromising our main silhouette. And I'm going to make some more connections here. And let's see on that side where also I want to connect it over here. And while we're at it, I'm going to take these vertex points and drag them a bit further to the right to have this more curvy there and following the flow. Now let's come back here to this element. And I'm going to take these faces here. Let's start here. Let me first of all dissolve these ones to make that more easy what we're about to do, which is also one of these inset actions to give that a bit of a bevel. But first we need to dissolve some of these edges, which would otherwise complicate that. And we're only gonna do that here at the back because that's really where the player is gonna have the view on it. Let's take that selection all the way down. And now with inset, let's put the numbers down to 0.3 for both of them, thickness and depth. That's then being followed up by making another ring selection that we add a subdivision to and smoothness put to 1 to push that out there. So that gives it a nice bevel right there where the player sees it. And now let's work also on that side. I'm not gonna do this bevel there, but we still need to work on our silhouette here. So let's only have that object in the scene. And I'm going to take these faces, invert the selection and hide it. And now it's time to work there also on this element here. Let's take these vertex points, same as this here. Let me undo that one. And let me think about the best approach for it. And that is to make some space, first of all, as I like to say. We're going to dissolve these edges here. We're going to reconnect that in a moment. And now what we want to do is take these two edges. Let's add subdivisions manually here. And this one I'm putting to 3 segments there. Based on that, we now have something to work with here. Let's make sure that is looking according to our reference. And there we have it. Now we can take these faces again, put the triangulate on it, followed by triangulation to quads. And let's unhide with Alt and H. Let me also unhide all the other elements again. And there is one more thing that we need to do on the low poly model. That's the last thing. Let's take these faces once more here. As a selection, let's invert it, Control and I, and with H, we now have that isolated here. Once again, I'm hiding everything and bring back only this element here. And based on that, we can now use our knife tool, and I have vertex snap on. Make sure it's snapped against this vertex there. And while pressing Y, we're making a precise alignment. And now on the Z-axis, the same thing all the way down here. So that's the starting point. Now let's use the knife again over here. On the Y-axis, it doesn't have to always snap against the vertex, but if we can, then we're gonna make use of that. Now we can do an inset, but first let me already give that a bevel here before we do the inset. Let's bevel that again here. And also over here, let's do a bevel and let's do that again. And in that case, let me make sure it's the vertex bevel, Control and B. You see my actions always at the lower right. I'm gonna dissolve the ones that I don't want here. Clear that up. And let's just connect it over here like this. Remember, we have that extension there. So that's why I had to change the angle to connect it. Let's connect it like this. And we are still doing some cleanup here. That one can also be dissolved then there at the bottom. That was only to get that shape into place here. And now we can take that face, extrude, snap back, align on the x-axis. And I want to then subdivide it there. Also align on the x-axis. Take these faces as a ring selection. And with inset, we push it out like that. Let's then align it again on the x-axis for these points. And then we can dissolve these edges. So that way it looks like there's some depth and there's some interesting stuff going on, when in reality it's just this small little box that we have there. Now let's take these faces that need to be connected and let's put it to triangulate faces. And that's it here. So that's also then pretty much it for the low poly. Let's unhide everything. and select all our objects so that we can take a look at our poly count, which is looking good. And that means it's time for the next steps. So before we get to the naming convention, I noticed that these edges that we aligned there earlier, that this edge loop is still existing here, as you can see. So I'm going to select it with Alt, and based on that, we can then dissolve that. So maybe you have that also on your end like that. Let's then take another look at our low poly so far, and based on that, we have one piece which is already the high poly. Let's just drag that out of the current folder where we are in. And now we're going to select everything in the Holosight folder, use the batch rename, put it to new, and let's say Holosight as the main name. Let's come over there again, and now as a suffix we're going to add _low. Let's confirm that, and let's then call the folder Holosight low. Over here you can see we have now this piece that we need to name individually, Torx _low, so that this is the same naming convention as our high poly, just with _low. And I'm going to make a copy of our low poly folder, hide the main one, go over here to the copy, come over to batch rename, and now we want to put the type here to find and replace, and we're going to find us _low.001 and replace it for _high. So that means that every element now has the same name aside here from that one. Torx _high, this one we can delete. That is based on the low poly copy. Let's drag this into that folder here. And now you will see that every piece that we select, let's unhide the low poly folder too. So you will then see that every piece now is matching with our name. This here is 007, and the same goes for the piece in our high poly folder. Speaking of which, let's call that one high. Let's then hide the low poly folder, and in the next episode we will then start to add our remeasure modifiers to that to make it a high poly model. I'll see you in the briefing and in the next episode, I hope.